Rizal's first arrival at Paris. On June 17, 1885, Dr. Rizal first arrived in Paris. The 24-year-old Rizal went to Paris, France to pursue his career as an ophthalmologist to cure his mother's eye ailment. On June 19, 1885, he visited Dr. Niquez, who showed the technique of the operation. Later, he went to see Dupuytren Museum of Anatomical Pathology. On June 18, 1885, with Felipe Zamora and Cunanan, he visited the Lainec Hospital to observe Dr. Niquez treated his patients. He was stunned to see the advanced facilities in the accommodation in the said hospital. 2 days later, Rizal visited the Lariboisiere Hospital. Here he observed the examination of the different diseases of women. On the next day, after observing Dr. Dupli, he went to the Jardin d'Acclimatation, situated outside Paris in the forest of Bologna, where he found plants of all species and the rarest and most beautiful birds. While in July 5, 1885 and August 2, 1883, in a letter to his parents, he continued describing his visits to museums and his excursions to important places in Paris. For 4 months from November 1885 to February 1886, Rizal worked as an assistant to Dr. Louis de Weckert, a leading French ophthalmologist. Here, he rapidly improved his knowledge. And during his free time, he also tried his skills in music and studied solfeggio, piano, and voice culture for a month and a half. He also continued to study languages, mastering French, German, Italian, English, Polish, and Greek. On Sundays, he attended fencing lessons at the studio of Luna and became Luna's model for his paintings The Death of Cleopatra and The Blood Compact. He also wrote several literary works written in French language. Rizal relaxed by visiting his friends such as the family of Pardo de Taveras, Juan Luna, and Felix Hidalgo. He also became a flutist, playing in various impromptu reunions of Filipino in Paris. He composed some songs, particularly Alin Mang Lahi, a patriotic song that asserts that any race aspires for freedom. Rizal's life in Paris was not economically good. In order to survive, his compatriots Juan Luna, Felix Hidalgo, and Tavera brothers helped him and wholeheartedly lent or gave him money for his daily needs.
Rizal back in Paris 1889 to 1890. Rizal was fascinated by the Universal Exposition of Paris, which opened on May 6, 1889. The greatest attraction of this exposition was the Eiffel Tower, with 984 feet high, built by Alexander Eiffel, a celebrated French engineer. Paris was jammed with thousands of tourists coming from all parts of the world. Daily, the exposition drew a vast crowd of 200,000 persons or more. Rizal and his friends attended the opening ceremonies and saw the cutting of the ribbon by President Sadi Carnot of the Third French Republic. There was also the International Art Competition and the exposition, where Felix Hidalgo won second prize, Juan Luna and Felix Pardo de Tavera won the third prize, while Rizal's bus got no prize. After all the festivity of the Universal Exposition, Rizal is not distracted in his pursuit of arts, literature, and patriotic works. Rizal established different organizations, and some of them are Filipinologists, where Dr. Ferdinand Blumentritt served as the president. Philippinology aims to examine the Philippines for a scientific and historical perspective and to attract other races to study about the Philippines and Filipinos to correct the false statements of other historians. Second, Kidlat, a temporary organization while the Universal Exposition is held. It composed of Filipinos. Some of them are Antonio Luna and Juan Luna, Gregorio Aguilera, Fernando Canan, and others. It aims to bring together the young Filipino and the French capital so that they could enjoy sojourn in the city during the duration of the Universal
Number 3. Indios Bravos. Rizal and the member of the Kidlat Club were amazed to see the Buffalo Bull Show, which featured the American Indian. Rizal was enchanted by the dignified and proud bearing of the American Indians. It aims to correct the misconceptions about Indios. He said, "Why should we resent being called Indios by the Spaniards? Look at those Indios from North America. They are not ashamed of their name. Let us be like them. Let us be proud of the name Indio and make our Spanish enemies revise their conceptions of the term. We shall be Indios Bravos." Number 4. RDLM Society. The aim is the propagation of a useful knowledge in the Philippines, the redemption of the Malay race. Aside from these organizations, one of his famous works in Paris is his annotations on the published 1890 book, Sucesos of Morga, in his stay in Britain Museum, which was later printed by Garnier Frères. He also spent most of his time in Bibliothèque Nationale, the National Library of France, expanding his knowledge and research. He wrote satirical work entitled Por Teléfono, The Telephone, Filipinas dentro de 100 años, Philippines in 100 years, and Indolencia de los Filipinos, about Filipinos' laziness. In February 15, 1889, La Solidaridad was established by Graciano Lopez Haina in Barcelona, Spain. It aimed to expose the bad conditions of the Philippines and to prevent it. It sparked change in the government and the church. Then Rizal left Paris because of 2 reasons. First is the expensive cost of living in Paris because of the exposition, and to give himself time in writing his most famous work yet, the El Filibusterismo.
January 28, 1890. Rizal left Paris for Brussels, capital of Belgium. Rizal was busy writing his second novel El Filibusterismo, which was a continuation of Molly. He was never idle even for an hour. Aside from writing its chapter, he wrote articles for La Solidaridad and letters to his family and friends. Being a physician, he spent part of his time in the medical clinic. For recreation, he had gymnastics at the gymnasium and target practice and fencing at the armory. For Rizal's articles in La Solidaridad, he used 2 pen names, Di Mansalang and Laong Laan. These novels are De la Verdad para Todos, The Truth for All, Verdades Nuevas, New Truths, Una Profanación, A Profanation, Differences, Filipinas dentro de 100 años, The Philippine a Century Hence, Ingratitudes sin nombre, Without Name, Sobre la Nueva Ortografía de la Lengua Tagala, on the New Orthography of the Tagalog Language, Cosas de Filipinas, Things about the Philippines, Sobre la Indolencia de los Filipinos, on the Indolence of the Filipinos. Rizal criticizes Madrid Filipinos for grumpy. In Brussels, Rizal received news from Juan Luna and Valentin Ventura that the Filipinos in Spain were destroying the good name of their nation by gambling too much. These two compatriots in Paris urged him to do something about it. Accordingly, Rizal wrote to M.H. del Pilar on May 28, 1890 to remind the Filipinos in Madrid that they did not come to Europe to gamble, but to work for their father's land's freedom. The gambling Filipinos in Madrid were angry when he learned of Rizal's moralizing. Thereafter, they called Rizal Papa or the Pope instead of Pepe. He got bad news from home. In the letters, the Calamba agrarian trouble was getting worse. Tenants, including Rizal's family, were persecuted and ejected from their lands. The sad news from home depressed Rizal. His heart bled to know the sorrowful plight of his parents, brother, and brothers-in-law. In his moment of despair, Rizal had a bad dream during the nights in Brazil, when he was restless because he was always thinking of his unhappy family in Calamba. Although he was not superstitious, he feared that he would not live long. He was not afraid to die, but he wanted to finish his second novel before he went to his grave. Rizal decided to go home, for he could not stay in Brussels writing a book while his parents, relatives, and friends in distant Philippines were in despair. Opposed with Graciano Lopez Haina's plan in going to Cuba, he said that Graciano should not let Cuba die of yellow fever. Instead, he ought to go to the Philippines to allow himself to be killed in defense of his ideals. A letter from Pasiano changed his mind. It was a letter which related the loss of the case against the Dominicans in Manila, but they appealed it to the Supreme Court in Spain. Rizal wrote to M.H. del Pilar on June 20, 1890, retaining to the latter's services as lawyer. He was going to Madrid in order to supervise the handling of the case. Two things brought some measure of cheer to the despondent Rizal as he was preparing for his trip to Madrid. The summertime festival of Belgium, and his romance with Suzanne Jacobi. She cried when he left toward the end of July 1890 for Madrid, stopping for a few days in Paris.